USC 27, LSU 20. This is not the studio, but I couldn't help myself. Came home, watched the game. I think we just witnessed about a 4.5 Chalai Classic out of five. We've never had a five Chalai Classic, at least yet. What a game, man. I don't really care what anyone says. I know LSU folks, because you just lost, you'll have negative feelings towards this. I just watched two playoff contenders early in the season. They may go on to lose four games, but that's the way a team that's going to be there at the end plays. Who am I talking about? Could be talking about either one of them. It's one where, think about this now. We were talking about the same thing with both programs. We're talking about USC, we're talking about LSU, we're talking about complete defensive staff overhauls and a lot of the same personnel. How much better could they look? I'll tell you, uh, and it's been a few months because I started to round my opinion up a little bit on USC, but back in the spring, you would not have caught me dead thinking that USC was going to hold LSU to 20. It's not because I didn't respect D'Anton Lynn. It's just because I thought he was very limited in what he had to work with. Miracle worker through four quarters, through 1 week, miracle worker. Think about this. Both of these defensive staffs, I think, deserve a ton of credit. These quarterbacks just went 29 of 39. That was Nuss's line. Miller Moss, 27 of 36, each of them over 300 yards, and yet 27 points was enough to win the game. The game stayed under 50 total points. So unbelievable to watch. Think about this, though. USC, I thought their wide receiver core coming into this game was underrated, not around their camp, but nationally, I thought it was. And Lincoln Riley, masterful at getting the ball dispersed to seven different receivers with at least two catches, or I guess seven different pass catchers with at least two catches. But here's what my mind cannot get over: 27 was enough. You go all the way back to Lincoln Riley's days, even at Oklahoma, when they're in big games, if they're winning games, the games are not played in the 20s, which brings me to what I kept harping on in the spring, and that is Lincoln Riley stepping in front of the microphones there in Los Angeles and talking about how his program needed a philosophy shift, how he was shifting the identity. And this came with him overhauling the defensive staff. And a lot of folks called BS on that. And I was not willing to call BS on it. I was totally fine taking a wait and see approach. Now, I may have had healthy doubt, but you deserve the right to try and, rectify problems that you identify with yourself. Lincoln Riley called his shot. He went in, hired the right guys, and now all of a sudden you watch them able to win a game played in a more classical fashion. It's not a shootout game. Good quarterback play tonight, but not a shootout game. And so then your mind starts to wander, and your mind says, "Well, wait a second. If all that stuff Lincoln Riley was saying was right, if it was more than just lip service, if that's actually what USC football is going to be, then fill in the blank." I'll tell you what I fill in the blank with. They're a contender in the Big Ten. It's really that simple. If you would have answered that question in the spring, if you would have told me the defense was, instead of going to be mildly improved, if defense is going to be drastically improved at USC, and early sample size suggests it is, USC is a Big Ten championship contender. USC is a playoff contender. It's as simple as that. That is not overhyping them. Okay. Miller Moss is a stud at quarterback. Plenty good enough. That receiver course, plenty good enough. USC, I know they want to run the ball better than they did tonight. They didn't, I don't even think they topped 80 yards rushing, but also it's week one. And, they played in a complementary enough style where they won the football game. But if you tell me that's what they're going to look like, keep this in mind too. We just watched the Big Ten in totality the first week of the season. Michigan quarterback play, spotty at best. Ohio State probably going to have a limited ceiling with Will Howard, and their offensive line still looks a little iffy. Oregon struggled with Idaho. I think Drew Aller at Penn State looked the best of any of the quarterbacks in the Big Ten this weekend. So maybe that thing's a little more wide open. And even if it wasn't perceived to be wide open, if USC's got good defensive play, and then that offense that Lincoln Riley is going to trot out there every year, they're going to be a factor. I cannot believe that it's that simple, but it's that hard. I say it's that simple in that Lincoln Riley just needed to make the right hire, which of course begs the question, why didn't he pull the trigger sooner? Everyone's got their philosophy on that, but this is a huge deal. It is a monumental win. They are not perceived to be able to hang in these kind of games. This is not the kind of game historically at least in recent history, that you see USC winning. This is not something where you go back in retrospect and say, well, LSU, maybe they're a little overrated, maybe this, maybe that. If anything, I think LSU answered the bell tonight, too. This is anybody's game. This thing's tied with under 30 seconds to go. So it's anybody's game. I mean, the loser in this game, once you had seen the first half and once you saw third quarter play out and you realize the kind of game you've got on your hands, this is the kind of deal where there's going to be a coach that made the right moves that ends up losing this football game, and therefore people are going to unjustly question him. Brian Kelly made the right moves too. Lincoln made the right moves. Brian Kelly made the right moves too. It's just he came up on the short end tonight because he played another really good football team. I know folks in the South may not want to hear they played a really good football team, but they did. USC, especially if they've checked those same boxes you're trying to check, is a really good football team. But you saw at halftime, and if you listen to Brian Kelly's comments coming out in the third quarter, he's just brutally honest. We perceive ourselves to have the advantage here. Our offensive line should be able to lean. And you know what? They tried to. And you know what? And this is really play of the game, even though it's not one play. Uh, USC held up. And that was probably my biggest question is twofold. Number one, can you withstand the initial barrage? I mean, I thought LSU would make no bones about the fact that early on they wanted to lean on them and they wanted to establish run. They did not. I think it came back to bite them a little bit, although I get that they wanted to settle Nuss into the game. But then you all of a sudden get to the second half and USC has not been leaned on, and they are withstanding the limited wave after wave you've thrown at them. But this game ends with LSU 117 on the ground. They meant they were going to lean on them in the second half, and it didn't work. That's the biggest play. It's not one play, but in totality, that's the biggest takeaway from the game, because that was supposed to be the thing that was evergreen for LSU. No matter what else happens in this game, we know we can always go back to the fact that we are so physically superior. O-line versus D front, none of the rest of it will matter. And it actually did, because you were wrong about that. But LSU, I thought, looked good. I thought the defensive staff made good moves. I thought they deserve a ton of credit. I think in the coming weeks, when you see this USC offense round into form, you'll look back and you'll realize instead of giving up 27, you held them to 27. You held them to 20, and they're trying to line up for a field goal at the end and end up running it in for a touchdown. But I think these were two playoff caliber teams. It's week one. It doesn't always pan out that way. Injury can crop up and whatnot. But, you know, I go back to this time last year, and you've got Jaden Daniels in one place winning the Heisman. You got Caleb Williams in another place having won the Heisman. And you're watching two respective Heisman runs be wasted because you can't get out of your own way defensively. You can't go back in time and fix that, but it is something my mind goes back to. It just goes to show you how important hiring is. LSU had the worst defensive staff in the SEC last year. And as a result, they had the worst defense or thereabouts in the SEC last year. Lincoln Riley's had defensive problems forever. It's as simple as committing to it, and it's as hard as committing to it. Now, here's the other question. Here's the other great unknown. This wasn't a conference game for either team. It's not a conference game for LSU. All right, so now automatically, because you played a quality opponent in week one, someone's got to lose the game. Then you're going to look at LSU as being behind the eight ball. They're not behind any eight ball. This thing's been expanded to 12 teams. Your SEC champ plus about the next three teams, at least in the conference, are going to be in. LSU is absolutely going to be a player in this. I actually, in a loss, watching LSU lose a game, have less questions about them this year than I did before the game. But that's not the story. The story is USC. The story is now, I'm thinking to myself, looking forward, I'll tell you a game that's it's been on my radar. We've talked about it a couple of times. I don't think the nation's talking about it yet. It's on October 12th. October 12th is already the biggest day of the year. And we know Ohio State goes to Oregon. We know that's OU, Texas. We know Ole Miss goes to LSU. Penn State at USC on October 12th is going to be one of the premier games of that day. And you may not have realized it up until this weekend, and some people may still not realize this. You're going to have two of the best quarterbacks in that conference going at it, in Aller and Miller Moss. And I thought Herbstreit made a really good point and emphasized it multiple times. We talked about it leading up. This is just like a billboard for college football. You've got two quarterbacks who are class of 2021 guys, highly rated, class of 2021. They don't immediately start and become the franchise guy, and they're still there. Never transferred out and came back. They're still there. And both of them, man, put on a show tonight. So that was an honor to watch. I'm not in the studio because we did the show early in advance of the game, but USC, man, USC pulled it out. Went against the model in this one. The model called LSU to win the thing by about 5. Had a feeling last week, started to really hone in on it, rolled with USC. LSU loses the game. I don't believe in ever saying there's not a loser. There's a loser. LSU loses the game, but there is a ton to be taken away, obviously for USC, but I think for LSU as well. So we're just getting started. College football 2024.